Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. If you are new to this channel, please consider subscribing so you can be notified when I make more content like this. Also, like and share this broadcast. We are live right now. If you're watching on the replay, we're not live. But if you're here at 7 p.m. on July the 24th, 2023, you are live and you can ask questions. I am joined this evening by actual teachers who are working in the profession, who have many years of experience. I mean, combined, we're talking many decades, but we'll go around and do intros. And the subject of this evening's program is mental health in schools and how the education ecosystem is choosing to deal with it right now. And I wanted to talk to actual teachers about how they see this, how this is affecting them, and also what their viewpoint is from the classroom. So let's go around. We'll start with Ramona. Just introduce yourself briefly, who you are, how many years of teaching, you've been teaching, what you teach, etc.
Well, Ramona Bessinger, and I'm an English teacher, middle school through 12th grade. I've been teaching for 24 years, world language certified and English.
Wonderful. Thank you. And you're in Rhode Island, correct?
Rhode Island. Yep.
All right. Stephanie.
What's going on, everybody? Thank you for having me. Stephanie Edmonds. I am a former New York City high school history teacher turned advocate. I've been doing a lot of advocacy in special education, but also just general child advocacy. And you can check me out at teachingliberty.org. And I also have a YouTube channel, though I do appreciate being able to sit back tonight and just be a guest. So thanks for having me, Deb.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here. Then we have a dissident teacher, also known as DT, who is in the classroom and preferring to be anonymous at the moment.
Yeah, that's because I'm in California and Gomorrah over here, so I don't want to be doxxed. So I've taught for 20 years or 21 years now in California. I've taught English language arts, grades 9 through 12, ELD from beginning, so no English in California, through transitional. And sorry, I just realized I'm not good at this.
Okay.
And I've taught all of history in the California curriculum, so that would be 9th through 12th grade and I have a history and AP, teaching AP economics as well.
Okay, awesome. So you guys have pretty diverse backgrounds. And Paul, you're next. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead there.
Oh, no problem. I got here late. So far, no worries.
So far, we've got a pretty diverse group. So you're next.
Yeah, I've taught. I'm taught for 9 years. I didn't teach the last few years, but I'm starting again in the fall. I teach mathematics.
All right, great. So some of you watching may know some of these teachers. They have been, a couple of them, actually 3 of you have been in the news fairly prominently. But tonight, I've gathered them here not to talk about, their activism so much, although I do hope you'll check out their platforms, and their profiles separately to find out what they've been doing to improve education, because each and every one of them has been doing things from writing to speaking to podcasting about this topic. But I wanted their opinion on what's been going on in our K-12 system in our schools with mental health. First, I want to ask you guys if we can get to some kind of baseline of understanding of, is mental health worse in children in America right now from your perspective? This is your opinion, I realize, but I mean, let's see where we all stand. Is there truth to the claim that children's mental health is worse and or on the decline? Anyone can jump in here.
Well,
Stephanie, you're muted if you're trying to speak.
didn't want to speak when you were speaking, and of course I messed it up. But I was saying, I think actually, and I've never thought about this before, I think there might be bipartisan agreement on that notion. Now, if we're talking about perhaps the causes of it, I think there's probably some areas where we agree, right? Social media and things like that. But then there's probably other areas where we're disagree about what's causing the mental health issues. But, I think we agree across political lines that mental health is an issue, and in adults as well.
Okay. Does everybody else agree with that mental health in children and teenagers is worse than, let's say, it was when we were kids, like, Gen X and millennials?
I think there's such an emphasis on anxiety and mental health in school. And I think there's almost a culture around it where, a couple of years ago, that culture didn't exist. But now there's such a focus and an emphasis on possible, pathologies that kids could have or don't have. But because they're talking about it so much at school, I wonder if it's not like, kids are sort of adapting this crisis or anxiety or levels are increasing because they're putting it out there. Everywhere you look, there's a discussion in school about mental health or perceived mental health or gender. So I wonder,
So you're saying that you think it might be a little bit of what we look for, we find.
For
we talk
sure,
about,
yeah.
we get.
And I mean, of course, there's the pandemic. Like, I think that you can't have this conversation without mentioning the pandemic. We were all locked down and forced even more into these habits, which I think worsen our mental health. But I agree. I think that just like sitting there and being like, oh, my mental health. It's like, how about you get out and go do some hard things? Like, get out and go play a sport, get out and just go have some fun, mess around. Like, I kick my son out of the house all the time. I'm like, go find something to do. And then he's like, digging a hole in the neighbor's, place. And I'm like, all right, maybe, but yeah, get out and do things.
Yeah, I get that. And Paul, what's or DT, whichever one of you, what's your take? I mean, is it worse? Are we seeing it more? Do we just have better diagnostics, as some people say? What's your take on it?
I'll jump in. I think Ramona is largely correct, but there are actual, it's very difficult to sort of separate. Is it a real phenomenon? Is it exacerbated? Because you have so many, and maybe we can get into this in more depth, but there are so many structural influences and people that are, essentially profiting from the mental illness train at an institutional level, that these solutions are sort of iatrogenic. They generate their own problems, which can then be mediated by this consultant class, or I don't know exactly how you can get into it, but there are also so many more touch points now between big ed and the health, the medical and mental health industry, that they don't really have an interest in fixing the problem. They have an interest in exacerbating the problem. So that's my general feeling about it.
And we've also sorry.
No, I was just going to say the American Federation of Teachers is becoming the fastest growing nurses union. So just that self-interest there to grow the health and mental health industry.
I love how words don't mean anything. It's amazing. Anyway.
Teachers, nurses,
they're the same. I was just going to say, I also have to point out that there's a lot of incentives baked into the cake now for kids to claim mental illness. Oh, I have test anxiety. I can't take this test today. I need an alternate mode of assessment. And if you guys don't think my AP kids were gaming this as hard as they could in every class, oh, you got another thing coming, man. Like, it's hardcore. But I agree with every point you guys have. I just think this is a multifaceted problem. And especially, you're also getting like victim points for claiming to be this like pathetic little, shrinking violet, terrified of your own shadow. The teacher's like, oh, let me hug you. And you need to be in the, safe circle and all that nonsense. So there's a lot of incentives that are pushing kids down the mental health forever treatment train and the I need extra help at school train, and I need a 504 plan train, and I need all of these things to help me succeed because I have a problem. It's undiagnosable. You can't pin it down, but I have a problem and I need your help.
Right.
Yeah, it was like ADD when I was in high school. It was sort of like really concentrated on that, and like getting the ADD medications or ADHD medications was like a big deal. It was a big underground market of reselling the pills, and you know, everybody was taking them to get work done or to party, you know, do all sorts of use them in ways that they are not supposed to be used. We'll say that.
Right. So what I'm also hearing is that we went from, because in the past there was a push to destigmatize so people would seek help. Now, whether that's parents seeking help for kids or kids themselves, teenagers going and seeking help from the school counselor. So I think there was a legitimate movement to say, hey, we need to destigmatize mental health issues so that kids who need help can get it. And in particular, that was fueled by bullying and school shootings and things like that, where we didn't want people who could have been helped before something terrible happened or suicide to not seek help. And what I'm hearing is we've gone from like, let's destigmatize it to it gaming the system. It's so normalized now that it's actually an identity marker. So not you have a thing you need to deal with and get better, but you are this kind of person and there's clout.
And I think a lot of that has to do also with the area of focus, right? It wasn't about making families stronger so that they can have these conversations and just doing a campaign to encourage people to do that behavior. Maybe it's again, like, how are you? I saw in Connecticut, they're doing some campaign to like help you make friends now. It's like, you know, it gets creepy when the government's trying to do those things for you. So, but this shift, it has really shifted from your family or your community to these very structured, we're going to show you how to get through all your problems in some government building.
Right.
Yeah, I have Ray Shelton has just joined us. You guys remember Ray, another California teacher. Hi, Ray. Welcome to the panel.
Hey, hello, everyone. Good to see you.
So glad you could make it. So Ray is here. Ray has been facing some difficulties. We did some shows about that in his California district because he stuck up for parents about some of these issues.
All right,
Tonight,
Ray.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we're just doing a quick round, round about, is that mental health in school actually worse? Because the claim is it's worse. We have to do something. I just want to get to the baseline of yes or no, it is or isn't worse. Not that means we have to do something, but just is it? And then we were touching on just now, like, is it real or is it Memorex? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is it real or is it like a social credit kind of a thing? Is it, to what degree do we think of that? What's your take on that? Do you think that mental health amongst children is fundamentally worse in general than, let's say, a decade ago?
I do think the mental health in general is worse, primarily because of social media. And the response from the schools in terms of offering quote unquote mental health is entirely disingenuous.
Oh, so okay. So we're going to get to that. We're definitely going to get to that. Right now, we're just like, so you think it's worse. You're thinking maybe social media. Others have said, there's the social credit that comes with you have anxiety disorder. There's the gaming the system. I want to take a test with alternative grading or timing, or I need more time to do my homework and stuff like that. So, but at least it sounds like we all would nod in agreement that mental health amongst children is measurably worse. It's, now what I want to talk about from each of you, and I think let's go in like around so everybody gets, to say what their thought is. What I want to ask you is, before this time period where we all agree that it was out and open in the schools and people were talking about mental illness, when it was either not talked about or not as bad, but you was still there. Like, you knew that when there were kids that had challenges, were your kids in your class who looked like maybe they had some stuff going on? Were they incapable of learning? Was it just like, I can't teach this kid because the kid seems a little anxious or depressed? Or I'm not talking about severe mental illness. I'm talking about anxiety. Let's just take anxiety, which seems to be the most common thing. Did you find that your students were still able to learn even when they had anxiety without the counselor and social workers coming into the mix? Or what is it legitimate to say kids can't learn until we address their mental health problems? So let's start with Paul, to the extent that you can answer this.
There we go. Yeah, what changed was that this whole entire support structure of paraprofessionals wasn't there to the degree, at least in my experience. And so what it would be is, you have a student coming in, take their temperature, see where they are. And I had students I would ask them, have you had poor experiences in math previously? Do you have anxiety? And then it would be on me to sort of facilitate that learning, right? It was just me and that person. And there wasn't the educational psychologist, there wasn't the counselor, there wasn't the student coordinator. There wasn't a lot of extra people who their salary is paid by intermediating in these situations and then counseling and creating this whole self-justifying identity around it. It was just me and the student. And if I needed extra help, it was important that I would go to, but it was very rare that I needed that. So yes, they could learn, but it was more like the ball was the relationship was just between myself and the student.
Okay. DT, what about you? You've taught some kids in some pretty challenging neighborhoods who the kind where they talk about trauma a lot these days. How was that for you?
So I think, I don't want to get too far down the road here, but the bottom line is any kid can succeed given so these guys are always half telling the truth. This is what's so frustrating. Yes, the kids need to feel comfortable in the classroom, because if they're scared of you largely or another kid, they're not going to do well. And I had kids who were getting jumped after school. So obviously these kids see each other during the day and they know they might be in trouble later. So they can be really scared, but they would come in, and if they trusted me, which they did, and if they knew basically what the class was going to look like, which they did, because I always basically did the same thing, most days, they were fine. And they usually did very well. Now, obviously that varies from kid to kid, depending on what their background is and what they're dealing with at any given time. I've got some horrible stories, but those kids overcame a lot of that stuff in my room. They didn't just fall apart every time I was like, read this article. No, I can't. They'd be like, okay, I'll try. And maybe they didn't do a great job, but they put the effort in because they knew that I was a trusted adult. Sorry about that, guys. I'm just telling you the language is being so, it's so annoying to me. It's very Orwellian, right? But I was trusted. They knew I wasn't going to hurt them. They knew what I was doing for them I was trying to help them. They understood that, even if they couldn't understand the material always. And for that reason, every kid from kids who had serious mental health issues to kids who lived in poverty to kids who had experienced some serious abuse, I mean, they all did really well. I mean, that's not fair. They did well in terms of they came to class, they did the expected things, they participated, they were happy, they were comfortable, they smiled, right? So these things happen. Did they all have great days all the time? Hell no. But they could do absolutely fine. They did not need intervention, and they mostly didn't need drugs. Mostly. Okay.
Well, that's a topic too. Also, Stephanie, what about you? How did you feel like your kids were doing? Even the ones who you felt like could use some extra counseling outside of the classroom, but did you feel like, oh no, I can't teach them until they get that?
I think I have a slightly different perspective just because I'm on the younger side of the people that are in this group. So I went to high school and there wasn't really paras, right? If a kid was being bad in class, they called security, like, get out, and then I went to college and went to grad school. And when I came out the other side, there was this whole system in place now. there were paras, there were like the resource room, right? There was, so I didn't really get to experience what the whole change looks like as a professional. Now I will say, in my school, we had some wonderful things that other schools didn't have. We had a meditation program, which brought in 2 extra teachers, and every student was trained in transcendental meditation, and all the teachers were as well. And we would stop twice a day and we would meditate. And, again, we had these extra teachers for support. If a kid was having a bad day, they could, go out and just do a check-in real quick or something like that. Now, were there kids who I think were gaming the system sometimes? Yeah, maybe. But I always had that really coachy. I was like a coachy teacher because I grew up playing a lot of sports. And so I just, I push my kids, I try to meet them where they are. There's some days where I couldn't get kids to do things, certainly. There's some days when I just had to be like, fine, go, like, if you're insisting. But for the most part, like, I always tried to have super high expectations and just like really, lean into the kids when I could, like, no, we're going now. We're doing another problem. Nope, so I definitely saw the things happening around me. I think I was blessed to be in a good place where we did have a cool balance of organic, authentic, social, emotional learning programs, right? Not ones that the state came in and said, you need to do this thing. But ones that my principal really, went out and he sold to the teachers and got everybody into it. And I think that's a lot of what's missing from the things that we're seeing is it's so top down, it's mandated, it's based on all this intense data collection, rather than genuinely building a good school culture.
Right.
That has a lot of the elements in it, that has all the buzzwords in it, right?
Exactly. What about you, Ramona? What have you seen as far as the mental illness in the classroom and whether the kids were able to learn? Like, did you feel like I can't do this until there's a program, or?
Well, okay. I'm going to just say that as a mother of 4 children and someone who's been teaching for quite some time, it seems to me that this whole emphasis on anxiety and mental illness is really taking something that is almost a natural stage of development. Kids go through anxiety, they go through, depression, and they are dramatic, and there are a lot of worries. That's all normal. To take those normal stages of development and turn them into something more than what they actually are, which is just growing up and going through growing pains. I think that in part that those natural stages of development have been hijacked by these industries like Castle and other for-profit companies that have this sort of taken advantage of these normal stages of development, and the kids are sort of they're being used to amplify,
right,
to sort of sell these programs to school districts. I think a lot of this is normal childhood development that is being misunderstood. But I will say that since 2020, with the whole influx of this radical politicized curriculum and professional development, I've seen more concern about mental illness and kids sort of attaching various identities or anxieties and whatnot. That seems to have spiked.
So that's interesting. You point that out, that there's more, that the adults are talking about it more, even if the kids are kind of like going along for the ride. The adults are like, oh my God, look at this problem, which is a great way to end up with Ray, because I'm sure you have a few things to say on that score.
Wow. I'm still going through those developmental stages with anxiety. First off, I have to say, you guys are utterly fantastic. I wish to high heaven that I was on the staff with every one of you. each one of you has said something really powerful. And, I know Paul spoke to it directly, and Stephanie did, and our unknown dissident teacher, is that when you go into a classroom and you tell the kids, you're not going to fail, I'm here, I'm going to help you. If you don't understand it, we'll do it again and again and again and again until you do understand it, and you have the right materials, and you let them know you support them, you're going to meet with success. It's as simple as that. If they know that you have their back, and that you are going to help them understand, and you know how to get the hardest of kids, the most damaged of kids, getting to feel a little efficacious, getting out of their head and starting to feel efficacious where they are, and they can feel that inside as fuel, you can take them anywhere. So I really think Ramona's right in terms of normal anxiety, the unknown, but a true master teacher, which is clear, everyone here is a master teacher. I've never heard teachers talk this way, to tell you the truth, that if you know what you're doing, you can move those kids. Okay. It's really as simple as that. Now, this issue of before and after, I have to point out that this whole inclusion started with no kids left behind under Bush. And this pushing of all of these children who in many ways are seriously disturbed, and they would always give them to me because, right, if you can do something really well, you end up with that problem, right? So, okay, you got meds, you're going to Shelton. Okay, that's just the simple way it is, right? Or anxiety or super autism or whatever it is. And you tell the kid, look, you're going to be successful. That is the end of the story. You will be successful, and I will be there every step of the way. But what has happened is the kids they've been taught to be thin-skinned also, right? So instead of saying, okay, look, guys, look at me, look at Mr. Shelton and say I'm an idiot. Okay, go ahead, say it. And I say, look, it didn't hurt me. Okay, you're just as a sound. Okay, it doesn't mean anything. So if somebody on the playground says you're an idiot or whatever, you just say, okay, you're being rude, get over it. Okay. Simple skills like that. Now it's all reported immediately. You're being bullied, you're being harassed, and you are a delicate little flower instead of knowing their own strength. So they've lost all of that resilience because they've been trained to be weak. They've been trained to report. They've been trained to see, microaggressions. Everybody says you're attacking me, and I say no, they're criticizing you, right? You're making me feel unsafe. Well, my teachers say that, and you say, look, you're over 18. What's this? Hear me, woman. I am. Hear me roar. I am woman. And then the next thing is I say, that's not a very good pedagogy, and you say, oh, I'm hurt. Give me a break. Okay, so they've lost their resilience, and it's because they've been taught this. And the other thing is so insidious. I don't know how it is with you guys, but the SEL, right? The social emotional learning, right? It's total 100% garbage. I'll put it that way, because we have the documents. We have, we FOIA'd them, and behind it, they say we need to make sure that racism is at the very heart of our SEL lessons.
Right.
Okay. And what they mean by that, of course, is there are oppressor groups and oppressed groups. That's what they mean. So this is not, in the younger grades, which is what I've been teaching, they do start with circles and how do you feel and, that sort of thing. But they are being taught to be mentally ill, to embrace quote unquote mental illness rather than
And it happened so quick because when I was a freshman, we did hazing. It was like a school tradition where if you were a freshman on the team, they would come to your house and, if you made varsity, so not a freshman necessarily, but like if you're a first year varsity player, and I made varsity when I was a freshman, they would come to your house super early in the morning, make you wear a ridiculous costume, and then walk around school all day singing songs and like just doing silly things. Like, and that was 2005, 2006, you know, like, and so it's just been in the last 7 years that things just totally flipped.
Yeah.
It does feel very sudden. And I think there are a lot of different factors. Social media has been mentioned, right? You mentioned social media. Others of you have said there is the identity stuff and the social justice stuff, which makes it not only okay to say, I'm not altogether perfect and things aren't going so well, but there's a power in saying, you're bullying me, I'm reporting you. So that somebody who feels the natural developmental phase of like, I'm anxious, I don't feel okay in my own skin, which we all went through, now has a quick and easy way to get some power and feel, like they have some control over their otherwise, not controllable situation. And the adults are, rather than saying to that child what used to be said to us, which was sticks and stones, or just sounds, or you'll be okay, or ignore it, or
I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever you're
whatever.
saying.
Like rather than that, it's like every single insult is worth documenting and addressing. And somebody mentioned in the comments too, they have friendship benches where you have to be friends with people. You have to sit and like make friends with new people, even if so. Freedom of association is out because that's de facto bullying if you're not friends with every person in the class. And so the title of this show was, the dark side of diagnosing and treating this in the school. And the reason I want to get this baseline of, okay, we agree things are at least worse in terms of everyone's talking about it. And the kids are saying they have these problems, even if they don't. And the adults are saying, there it is, there it is, there it is. And there's lots of new jobs that either didn't exist or certainly didn't exist in the numbers in one school. It was like the whole district had one or two of these people. Now the school has one or two of these people or more. And so I guess what I want to ask you as practicing teachers, or recently practicing teachers anyway, how do you see this making things worse? Whether it's academically, socially, culturally, whatever. I don't get, you can riff on whatever you want. Just each person, I want to have a turn, because I see some issues, and I want to get to some of the policies a little bit later. But I just want each of you to have your say in terms of what you think the dark side of doing this in the school is. So, who wants to go first? Anyone?
I mean, I had two things come to mind. I mean, you said we're going to deal with the policy later. And so that's a big thing that I definitely want to talk about.
Well, not so much later, like right after this.
Okay, after this. Community schools, right? Community schools. So we'll talk about that when we talk about policy, because that's how the government and the big money are going to come together and really wrap around services. But the thing before that is they're not just coming in and doing these programs to help kids out. They're coming in and they are collecting data. Each one of these things comes with some form the teacher has to fill out on the student, or if it's class dojo, they're doing monitoring of in real time of these kids. And so what are they doing with this data? Right. Also, you realize why they need the kids is because these things feed into artificial intelligence, right? They're scraping the data to feed their AI, and the AI are new, right? They're literally learning from our children how to mimic, human behavior and how to learn. They're getting all the basics and soaking that up. So that's my biggest concern is the data, how it's being weaponized. And they're already saying out loud, they want them from cradle to they're saying cradle to career, but it's really cradle to grave.
It's actually womb. It's actually womb.
Oh yes, in Jersey
now,
they're counting.
Which is
they're
the
counting.
Wildest thing.
Yes, because they need it because their enrollment's down. So they're like, where are we going to get more people? They're counting,
and they're bumping up against the pro-choice people now, which is interesting because so their desire for like total control and massaging the numbers is now reaching. See these interest groups collide as like the appetite grows.
Right. It's like these private public partnerships If you look up the word fascism in the dictionary, it will tell you it is when government and private businesses get in bed together. Okay,
Yeah,
so
When they get in your womb, I think that's a sure sign.
Oh, Lord.
reproductive rights, reproductive rights.
Because it's
Right.
so crazy. But I have a tweet thread about it. I'm just digging into it, but it's a teacher in Jersey told me about it. It's the wildest thing.
Yeah. Anybody, Ramona, what do you think? How does all this focus? Now, you kind of hinted at it before where you said, like, you know, you're talking about it so much, but what else would you like to add about how it's hurting?
You know, I was just thinking as everybody was talking, that literature can be a really, really healing way to discuss all kinds of issues and problems that all kids can relate to. And we've gotten so far away from teaching, you know, truth in literature and all sorts of literature. Now it's all about activism. It's all about division. It's all about hate. It's all about worry and scaring children. So as we're talking about this, I'm getting anxiety stricken. I'm thinking, you know, if kids are, no, but you know, no wonder they're all over the map and worried. One, they're getting hijacked. Their normal, natural developmental stages are getting totally hijacked by these companies like Castle and other, you know, other agencies. And two, they're missing out on talking about literature and really great literature. Like we can learn so much from, I'll talk about Anne Frank, which was taken out of the classroom at the middle school that I was at, and Romeo and Juliet. Now everything is taught through a lens of political ideology. Right. And these are concepts that may or may not have anything to do with the actual text, but they're, you know, so my wish and my thought as I'm listening to this is that we somehow return to some normalcy, some universality where kids can go to class and maybe they are feeling annoyed or sad or worried, but they can read Romeo and Juliet with their teacher and their classmates, and they can act it out and discuss the themes and really truly relate to some of the problems that, you know, Romeo has or Juliet has or Anne Frank had, or, you know, any of the other millions of other authors out there, you know.
Well, what you're talking about too is you're talking about getting, we always talk about being present, be in the present moment. But I think for kids, there are times when it's appropriate to not be exactly in the present. And when they're going to, I know for me, I remember vividly being a teenager, and you mentioned Romeo and Juliet. And what I loved about it was it's like traveling to a place I'll never actually go, which is the past. And also countries I've never been to and things like that, where you can go on an adventure without leaving your seat. You can get out of whatever your present worries are, whatever your present issues. You realize, like, you know what? There were just all these millions and millions of billions of people who came before me and lived their lives. And, you know, like they're the explanation. It was in that movie Oppenheimer. Like the reason we learned the past, or was actually not in the movie, it was in a preview. Somebody said, when you study the past, it's not just about dates and places. It's you're learning, you're getting the explanation for today. You're getting like the why of what we are now. And teachers who could help us with literature, I felt they were my favorite because it got me out of my head.
Right.
And I think you're onto something there.
Well, everything is taught through a political lens. So they're missing out on the real story and the real history and the costumes and the beauty of, you know, the way the story might be written. So, you know, no wonder they're all anxiety stricken. It's coming at kids in multiple different directions, including
it also feeds the egocentrism, because if you keep making right this second and the future that they have to address, you know, make better, the most important thing, then, you know, it's like you're powerless, you're helpless, all these problems of the world, but you're responsible to fix them. How does that not, you're like, make you feel anxiety ridden?
Deb, I'd really like to piggyback on
I'm
what
sorry.
Ramona said. It's okay.
DT, then Ray.
Sorry, I just think it's really important that the whole point of literature and history and the humanities and art in general is to see our shared humanity and to see in the experiences of others and often, I mean, I always look for myself in the bad guy. I'm like, okay, where am I like that guy? Like, where am I the bad guy? And I think that's my oppositional defiance disorder, but it's fun. Anyway, so I honestly think that like we need literature, we need history, we need art. And here's what's happening. This is, Deb, you'll like this because this is tinfoil hat time. This is all about pushing kids every time they have an interpersonal conflict to a mediocre adult to mete out some kind of response. So they have zero agency. You go and whine and moan to the teacher or the counselor or the principal or whoever, and that adult will deal with it. They will get you justice. You can't get justice by yourself. You can't deal with this problem by yourself. You are so weak and so pathetic that you can't tell that kid, shut up, or I'm going to punch you in the face after school. This is an acceptable way. I'm sorry. This is me being a mom of two boys. If somebody is going to hurt my kid or someone else who's is weaker, I expect my boys to stand up and say something. I don't expect my boys to run to some, purple-haired septum nose ring wearing teacher and say, she's being mean and you need to stop this right now. You have to bring the full force of the school down. And as we all know, I'm sure everyone's going to nod when I say this, as we all know, there are no consequences for behavior. No. Yeah, we can pretend we quote unquote deal with it and nothing's happening to these kids. So this idea, so you're dependent on somebody else to solve all your problems. That person tends to be incompetent. The system's incompetent. So what you're actually learning is there is no justice, right? But you're forced to go through that system because if you do it yourself, you're the bad guy. You're in trouble and you're going to pay for it, right?
100%.
And so like, to me, this is all about compliance and it's always about compliance.
But defund the police. But defund the police.
It's
like go to the other people to solve your problem, but not those guys.
Yeah, I mean, it might be Hanlon's razor, like never attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity. But like, basically, this is what they want. They want kids to run to an adult and not deal with problems themselves and not have any confidence. Like Ray and I both were talking about is when kids see that they can do something, they keep doing it and they get better at it. But when you constantly say, no, you don't do this, give it to somebody else to do, then they never gain that confidence and they never able to fully grow into their own humanity. And if you deny them To Kill a Mockingbird and you deny them Huckleberry Finn and you deny them Romeo and Juliet, they don't see that, oh my God, these problems have been going on forever. And these people overcame them. And millions of people read these books and love these books and they must love them for a reason. But now we're like, oh, we don't need to read that. We need to read Genderqueer or Lawn Boy or whatever. So,
as if they're even reading.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, like we talk about all the books we want them to read. And then what immediately leaps to my mind is what percentage of each class could even do it? So even if we gave them the great literature, would they have the skills to be able to read, not just decode, but comprehend?
How many of the teachers can do it?
That's what I'm saying. At the whole system is just, we're not only we're depriving them of it, but we've deprived them of it way back in elementary school. So by the time they get to a teacher who's teaching high school, who was, like a Ramona or like you, who has the ability to teach these books really well, you might be saddled with kids who are like, where do I even begin? Even if I want to assign these books, I'm going to have to give them like training wheels and crutches and everything under the sun, like No Fear Shakespeare or something, because they literally cannot read it.
And maybe that's the plan,
This is what I'm wondering. So Ray, you had something you wanted to say too about this when we were talking about the dark side.
And there is a serious dark side. And I would take the reverse of DT in terms of attributing to malice rather than stupidity. I do think these people know exactly what they're doing. Evil of this size, of this magnitude, does not happen by accident. Okay, these laws that get passed laws do not pass themselves. There are reasons they get passed, and there are constituencies behind them. But the first thing I want to say is to Ramon. I love you. Okay, I just love you, Ramon. I'm serious. in my class, I always taught literature with, I threw the textbooks out. I never used them. When you think of things like reading Anne of Green Gables, or Call It Courage, or The Lost Prince, or so many other books which allow these children to see themselves in what I love Stephanie talked about, growing into their own humanity, seeing themselves as part of something enormous and beautiful, in which we have stories where young people have confidence and they deal with their various issues successfully. That is a shining light to children. Now, in terms of the darkness, what we have now, of course, is everyone is being trained in the ideology of being a victim, of victimology. And this goes back to the counseling, which we started earlier, in terms of that the big trend, at least out here in California right now, is the idea of generational trauma.
Right.
And everybody, and of course, it's specifically aimed at the Black population, right? The effects of slavery trickling down forever and ever and ever and ever. But in these trainings, up goes Shelton's hand, right? Say, well, what about the Irish and the potato famine? What about the Jews in, Eastern Europe, under the czars? What about the Chinese when the Japanese occupied? I mean, you could pick any group and get generational trauma, which of course throws their cart over. But they're taught to see themselves as victims, and so now with our readers and the little things they give us, we've got Paco Sanchez, who is not allowed to have a library card, right? And everybody else is terrible because he can't get it, or this is 2023, right? And Shaniqua Washington apparently can not swim in the swimming pool with the white kids or whatever, right? So
is that even real? Like,
yes, it is real. Yes, these are in my reader. And
wow.
Or someone's, well, more typically like they're making fun of a Black girl's hair or something like that, right? Even though they're called Dutch braids, okay, because it's a style from the Dutch, okay. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But they're taught to be victims, right. And the reason they're taught to be victims is to deny them their humanity. And the throwing out the literature is one technique to do that. And then back to the social part of this, as you were talking about, is separating the parents from their children with information, which is a Maoist technique. And when Mao took over, he created 10 identities that you could belong to. Your identity was a farmer, or your identity was a this, and you had to place yourself in that identity. Okay. And we're seeing exactly the same techniques at work, exactly the same narc on your parents. Your parents don't know what they're talking about, so forth and so on. So,
okay. So this is
very dark.
That is very dark. Paul, what about you? What do you think about making the school both a diagnostic center and a treatment facility for mental illness? Because that's basically what's happening.
And when I think about what I want most from my students, I want them to be strong. I want them to be able to cope and solve problems that they encounter with their own faculties, right? And so when I hear about all these great books, you're all these amazing English teachers talking about the books that I read. That's our cultural legacy. As Americans, as global people. I don't want to say citizens, but there's all this great literature everywhere, which is, with a good teacher, is doing the work of healing and growing the individual into that coping, resilient, functional person. So when they're undermining it, and they're dumbing everything down, and they're intermediating, and you have they're creating a profit system around a substitute for it. I really do think that is on purpose, because it's a patronage system, this entire thing. And so all of this money is being spent to puff up, these individuals who are taking over the job, which was local, which was, so when I think about what to do in my classroom, it's going to be protecting the student from the institution and from all these forces. So I need to create a safe space in the classroom where we could rebuild and have those things where they won't run to the counselor at the drop of a hat. But like what Ray is saying, so the self is like, if you think of the self as a circle and a locus of control, and so as you're trained to become more of a victim, you slap labels on yourself, and the zone, that penumbra, is now occupied by people who are you're going to run to for help, and then you shrink. You literally become smaller in your will and what you can operate in, right. And you become you actually become sort of a crippled. Your development is crippled, and right. So how do you take a child in that state and try to give them those success events where they can do it themselves? And math is a great opportunity to do that, because it's almost in its own world. It's a formal, it can be abstract, and if you succeed at math, it can be just a purely amazing intellectual challenge. So right. I think there's an opportunity for math teachers to sort of carve out a way back, because math is sort of the last, until recently, has been the sort of last redoubt of.
It is our last stand, though. If we look, 1984, they can get you to say 2 + 2 = 5. It's over.
We're fighting that
about the
war.
new
You're going to go to the Ministry of Love, and they're
yet.
going to just. But it's not telling, though. Here we are talking about mental health care in school and diagnostic, and we want to help the children. And several of you have either alluded to, or in Ray's case, directly said that it's on purpose, that they're, that everything is inverted. We want to help the children. They have mental health problems. But they're actually creating the problem. They're sort of manufacturing, they're pathologizing childhood and normal developmental stages. And then it seems like they're taking the cure and making it and marginalizing it, making it, evil, whatever. Cure being, parents, normal academics, people not constantly talking about mental health, that, we can't do any of these things because we have to do the other. And I want to get to Stephanie, because there's something going on right now. We hinted at it with policy. And I know she's been eager to tell everybody about what she's been working on as far as what they're going to do next. So we just already touched on how they're looking at every kid as having something. We got to investigate all of them and to do a little diagnostic on all of them, not just the ones who come and present, or the teacher goes, this kid is out of control, but literally, hi, Johnny, welcome to the school. We're going to give you these tests to find out which of the mental illnesses you have and right. what supports you need. So what are they doing next? What's their next? They being the government.
So the Federal Department of Education, which is headed by Secretary Cardona, they are changing the IDEA, which is Individualized Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and it is supposed to be providing services for students with disabilities. And what they're changing is they're changing an aspect of consent. So there used to be, at every stage along the way, it requires consent, right? You need consent to test your child for a disability. You need the consent for what services they're going to provide. And then, because there's not all of the funding there that the federal government promised, and it's a very expensive endeavor, what has happened is they're supplementing with Medicaid, right? So if you're on Medicaid, the schools will then ask you, hey, can we communicate with your insurance to run these services through Medicaid so we can reimburse our costs? And they're supposed to get your consent. And this is an opportunity for parents to ensure that, okay, the thing that I agreed to in the IEP is actually the thing that I'm being serviced with, and I'm satisfied with that service. And for parents, it can be a very important tool to ensure that the two things match. Because if you don't tell them that they can bill for that service, they still have to provide the service. They're just on the hook for it. So it's very much in their incentive to be like, okay, let's make sure that the parent is satisfied with this service, whether it's a different provider, or it's more sessions, or whatever it may be.
And they still don't do it. And
Right.
people
I
still
mean,
have to go to court
right.
all the
Yes,
time.
exactly. But it's a mechanism that is there to provide protection so that at least you know, right? There's that opportunity to check. Well, they want to get rid of that. They want to make it so that once you enroll your child into special education and approve the services, the school can then just if your child's on Medicaid, so if you have private insurance,
Or S-chip.
Right, or CHIP, exactly, like public benefits, basically, broadly speaking. If you qualify for those, the school will just automatically bill services through. And you say, well,
But they want to do it for all students for equity, because they've actually said this in the document. And even from the very first time that they encounter the student. So this is prior to a parent enrolling the child in special ed. So for example, let's say you send your kid to kindergarten and the little kid comes in and they're like, okay, we're going to do a screening of all the kids. And but what are they going to do? They're going to look for the kids on Medicaid.
Right, because it's a money funnel, right?
That's
it becomes a money funnel because now they can just tell Medicaid, even though it's a crime, we know it's a crime to fabricate documents, but if you know anything about special education, that's all they do is fabricate documents, right? And so they're just going to charge things and open up this money funnel into the schools, and they want to provide wraparound services. So it'll be kids for special education, and when you think of special education, maybe there's some counseling. A lot of kids do get counseling, but we're talking like opening up those mental health services that they're providing. Right. Of course, the transgender thing is the thing I'm thinking about in the back of my head because we're seeing a lot of those stories. But yeah, so and then if you go and look at the unions, the teachers unions, the National Educators Association and Randy Weingarten, all they've been talking about they've been talking about it for some time, but really intensely in the past few months, community schools with wraparound services. They want to be able to give your child a health screening for mental health. They want to do all their doctor's visits. They want to give them the dental care. They want to give them their vaccinations. And if they can charge it through to Medicaid without, or, CHIP or whatever your public assistance is, without your permission, we know that there's going to be a discrepancy between what you say they can do and what they actually do. Or, maybe they don't do it and they just charge through the money to get money for other things and they're laundering it. But still, it's very, very concerning. And I know it's easy. Everybody wants to share the videos online of like the queer people chanting, they're going to come for your kids. But this is the thing that we should be sharing online. This is the thing everybody should be going absolutely mad about. I know it's boring and bureaucratic and complicated, but this is the thing.
Yeah, they're basically taking advantage of the fact that we outsourced education. Parents have outsourced education now for 100 years, but by force. I mean, let's be fair. It's not like parents have a whole lot of choice in the matter, in the sense that you are obligated to get your children an education. And if you're not going to provide it yourself at home, then you've got to enroll them. So that is, that's something. And now they're saying you should outsource all of it, character and values, healthcare, all of it, outsource all the decisions. We'll make all the decisions for you. I bring it up all the time on my channel, but I have to, because every time I say that phrase of like, we'll make all your decisions, it'll make life easier for you, all I think of is A Wrinkle in Time. I think of that book and I think of it telling these kids, oh, but it'll be so much easier for you. You won't have to make any of those decisions. I'll do it for you.
I hate to break it to you, Deb. The Wrinkle in Time reference, the kids don't know it these days.
We'll all bounce the ball at exactly the same time as we come out of our houses.
It's such a good book.
The adults don't know the reference, but I'm telling you, like, if everybody out there, if every parent had read this book, they would have an easier time recognizing what's being done in education right now with regard to mental health. And that the what in the book they tell you makes you happy is not having thoughts. Not having thoughts of your own. The thoughts are given to you by it. The actions are dictated to you by it. The feelings are given to you. Even your food isn't food. They like fool you into thinking that this dust that you're eating, the sludge that you're eating, is this fabulous turkey dinner. This is, I know it sounds crazy, but that's essentially what I see going on. And because why would anyone think it's acceptable for classroom teachers to be involved in your child's mental health?
Right. That's
Like,
right.
we take this for granted. And like, if you asked someone 5 years ago if they would have felt comfortable with their kids, I don't know, 5th grade teacher, doing questionnaires and surveys and collecting data on behalf of a private corporation about their child's feelings, like multiple times a month, if not a week, I think most people would have been like, I'm sorry, what?
And these are the people who are like, capitalism is racist and sexist and every ist, and yet this is the face of capitalism. Like,
yes, stakeholder capitalism, the special kind,
private,
otherwise known as fascism,
public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
It's fascism, and it's eerily similar to what they've been doing in China. Borderline identical, but now, as far as your work, for all of you who work with students, when you have to deal with this, like, so in other words, there's all this extra stuff, or it's interruptions, or it's the new attitude on the part of the students, or whatever. How does that impact your teaching? Like, the thing that you need to, what you wanted to do and you wanted to teach, how does all this focus on mental health affect you as professionals?
Can I say something, Deb?
Yeah.
I'm curious in regard to Stephanie, and that is that I'm not boasting, but when you know what you're doing and you're successful and the children are happy, the parents are happy, and that provided me for decades a wall of protection against the larger school population, because my students did very well on tests. They were always well behaved, and everybody wanted to get into my classroom. We have an enormous school, almost 2,000 students, and I was protected by the parents, so it never affected me. I just did whatever I wanted, and when the administrators would say, you need to be doing, I say, well, you tell me what to do. Tell me what to take off my plate, and then they got the message and left me alone until very recently when I spoke at a school board meeting. That was too much for them. So I'm curious about Stephanie. You seem to be really involved in this sort of thing. About were you protected? As everyone else, do you find yourself protected by the fact that you are a good teacher?
I mean, I'm not really a good one to ask because I got fired. I got fired because of the mandates. So it was like kind of before this. But yeah, I mean, I generally felt like I had I was a young teacher. Like I'm sure you have years on me. Like, you're probably way better teacher than I
Stop calling us old, Stephanie.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to call you old, but I'm trying to be humble to the fact that I was only in the classroom for 5 years, and like the last year and a half was during COVID. So, but yeah, I mean, like, I did feel like, at least for the time when I was in there, being a good teacher did afford me a certain ability. Not that I didn't ever get in trouble or anything like that. But I think it does matter to be a good teacher. But
I want to go to Ramona.
It matters to have the right opinions.
I want to go to Ramona next, if it's all right, because I think Ramona has a thing or three to say about it.
Oh boy. Well, just to speak to all the interruptions to education, I think any teacher who's listening to this show right now will be able to relate to this. We had to do like multiple analyses of students. One of them in particular was called a bias assessment. It was ridiculous. They had teachers doing these psychological profiles of students that we're not even qualified to do. So teachers are checking the box. And this, of course, is very time consuming and takes away from the really important things that we should be doing, like, planning that really great lesson and integrating wonderful multicultural literature and bringing in diversity and music. You don't have the time to do this great teaching because there's a bell ringing or a bell going off or some practice drill, or there's some, assessment that we were made to do for kids. So there was very little time to do this authentic, beautiful teaching. And we need to get back to that. It's,
I wanted you to address did you feel protected? Did you feel protected by being a good teacher?
I know where you're going with this, Deb. So at times in my career, very protected up until I would say when I spoke out against what I saw in the schools. And I have to be very careful not to speak too specifically because it's ongoing. So when I spoke out, it seemed like all that protection, outward protection, went away. And I always had a classroom environment that was very, I think, quiet and welcoming and joyful. And really, truly, my job meant the world to me until, of course, I went against and spoke out against CRT in the classroom, these bizarre gender cult ideologies in the classroom, the strange professional development. Then all of a sudden I was like this social outcast. And when that happens and you become the victim of outward aggression and protests, it's a very natural thing for people to distance themselves, right? Now, a lot of parents reached out during this time to me privately. Almost everybody said, "Oh, please don't mention my name," because they're afraid. So I have, for the majority of my career, been that teacher where, I took great field trips with the kids. We listened to music. I had a very diverse classroom, and I pride myself on that. Until, of course, that moment when, as you know, Deb, because you were right there, when I went public with the horrible things that I seen and saw at the time, starting in the year of 2020. And then all of a sudden I was public enemy number one. And it was an uphill battle and fight. And since then, since 2020, 21.
Ramona,
education into.
Ramona, I'm getting a hint that perhaps you're involved in a legal case, and that's why you're hesitant to speak. Is that true?
Well, I'm in sort of, I will say, limbo. It's hard to explain. Went back to school last September, and unbeknownst to me, there was a stage protest with a couple of students and arranged by a couple of teachers for my speaking out, for exercising my opposition to politicizing education. I was brutally harassed and bullied. It was really, really a terrible, terrible thing that I had to go through. And now I've been placed on, and this is public, so I can say this, on administrative leave with pay, where I've been since October. So there isn't legal action on the part of the school department. I'm being represented by Judicial Watch. And so it's sort of like this, as my attorney said, a little game of chess, I suppose, is being played. I don't know what is really going on at this point, other than here I sit, in limbo.
Right. Deb, do you mind if I take a few minutes to explain my situation?
No, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So Ramona, it sounds like you and I are exactly in the same situation. In April, there were some boys pretending they were girls were involved in violating girls' spaces, privacy, and their spaces. And of course, that's entirely legal in California. And some parents asked me to speak out on that. So I went to the school board and basically said that there are only two genders, and that and you can't change your gender. What adults do is their business, but this is about sexualizing children.
Right.
And that's all I said. I didn't really say much more than that. And immediately the next day, I was yanked from my classroom and put on administrative leave, exactly as you are. Then another set of teachers began a campaign of harassment on Facebook and in public, referring to me as a Nazi and, a right-wing extremist and, so forth and so on. And all of my colleagues, every single one, was silent. The people I've worked with for 25 years, and they all believe exactly the same thing as I do because we've been on the same curricula teams. So I know who they are and they're my friends. But, well, we'll put friends in quotes, okay? So I am, when they put you on administrative leave with pay because that's not a disciplinarian action.
Right.
So legally you have no recourse.
Right.
Unfortunately, my administrator made a mistake in terms of notifying in how she notified the community that I was put on leave, which of course they should do, right? But she did more than that, and she defamed me. So I'm involved in a First Amendment retaliation legal case right now against Glendale Unified, and these lawyers, they cost $700 an hour. So one of the things that you may want to consider, and I certainly did it, I had my lawyer do it, is set up a go send give.
Yeah, give send go.
Give send go. Thank you.
Send go. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for correcting me.
My attorneys are pro bono, so
okay. So
that's good.
And Ramona, I have to say that you are a heroine, because these legal cases cannot go to court unless we have standing, and you can only have standing if you're an actually employed teacher. So these laws that we are struggling against, you, as you know, Ramona, you are on the forefront, and when the other teachers turn against you, it is stunning. It is absolutely stunning.
It really
is.
is.
I just want to say I was smiling a little bit when you guys were telling your stories, but that's not because they're not. I was just thinking like how badass you guys are and how like proud I am, and it's incredible. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
The death threats are no fun.
No, I bet that's what I'm saying, and I know it's not a joke, but it's just like, oh man, you guys are like, yes, thank you. This is what we need.
Are you really worried about death threats from teachers, Ray? I mean, we can't even teach our own content. Like, no, I'm not worried about any of them killing me. Says the anonymous one.
The anonymous death threats.
Says the anonymous. Says the person without her face or name on the screen.
That's right.
No, I'm not afraid at all.
Right. No, that's not what I meant. It's
I'm kidding.
It's upsetting to be a victim of the sort of terrible things that was I was called a racist, a white supremacist, and transphobe, and all these terrible things. And of course, I mean, it was public, it was in the news, and my family, my kids, and this affected me on many levels, but also my own children, my family, my friends, and but the fight is still on, and I'm not giving up. So
good for you. Good. And DT, I know that you you're teaching, and what about like Ray's question? Do you feel like it has provided, being a good teacher, an effective teacher, has provided you with any protection from some of this, or have you faced similar situations?
I have so much street cred in my classroom. Like, my students just go, "Oh, she's legit." So, and my number one rule with all my students is I'll never lie to you. I will never lie to you. And so even if like I say really uncomfortable things, sometimes I'm like, well, prove that I'm lying. Like, I'm not lying. I'm just telling you the truth because I respect you enough to know you can handle it. And I think that is enormously important. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've had parents who, they hate me because I'm too strict or too mean, or my standards are too high or whatever. And so they try to obliquely attack me. But most of when I'm not in a public, I'm in a charter school now, but that wasn't because I couldn't have stayed. And sometimes I regret not staying because I feel like I did a lot of good for a lot of kids by being that dissident voice and being like, yeah, that's bull. That's nonsense. And here's 27 reasons why that's nonsense. And I'm sorry I just hurt your little fifis, but maybe go read about it and then you'll find out that I'm not lying. And so I was always the kids protected me because they wouldn't snitch. Does that sound really awful? Like, they wouldn't. And this is what's scary about that, though. I know this. I'm very self-aware about this. if you have a really charismatic teacher who's a full-on commie, right, you're going to get that same effect, and it's dangerous, right? Where like the kids don't want to tell, you don't want to tell on that teacher because that teacher's the quote unquote cool teacher. And so it's dangerous, but I think that it can be dangerous. I mean, obviously I think I'm a white hat, right? But some people would see that differently. They just would. But my point is that if you're really good and you're in California, you do have a lot of protection because of pedagogical freedom, right? But I definitely got written up a million times during COVID, which was super fun. And I definitely got talked to about the way I talked to my girls and some of my boys about their appropriateness of their dress or their language or their attitude or whatever. Because like I feel like I'm Stephanie in a way, like I'm a hockey mom. And so I talk to my boys the way their dad talks to them, and he talks to them like a hockey coach. And so I talk to my kids like a hockey coach. And sometimes that is not appropriate. I'm not gonna lie about that. But the kids respect it because they know that I'm treating them as an equal. And I don't mean they're equally as knowledgeable or educated as I am, but they're equally valuable as a human being. And I truly believe that. And I never disrespect them. And so I think there is protection in that. And more importantly, like, I'm going to go back to Ray saying, I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever you say to me.
I'm rubber, you're glue. Right. Whatever you say bounces off me, sticks to you.
Right. And so here's the thing. We have to get over caring. I mean, I get, Ramona, what you're saying about your family getting hurt. Totally understand. I left school. I left my job because I had to get my kids into a safe school. I had to leave my job and teach at that other school. Like, that's why I left, because there was no way I could get my kids out. And I wasn't going to leave my kids for one more second in those schools, my own children. Sorry. But I understand what you're saying, but we have to be like, you know what? Call me a bigot. I don't care anymore. Call me a racist. I don't care anymore. Call me a transphobe. I don't care anymore, because what you're doing is worse. You can call me names all day long. I'm an adult. I know who I am. I know what I stand for, and I walk the walk. So I sacrificed a buttload of money and a really secure job to go to protect my own children. And I kick ass at my new school too. And those kids, right? So like, I'm not going to back off, even though I'm not like, again, this is mostly to do with my respect for my husband and him saying, I really don't want this additional drama in our life.
No, I
right?
get it.
So that's why I'm not, a public, but if it was just up to me, if my husband had a freak hockey accident, I would definitely be public like tomorrow, but that's probably not going to happen. So I just am telling you guys, like, we have to just care a little bit less about what people who are evil say about us. They're evil. So why do I care?
The thing that concerns me is, with all of this emphasis on mental health and starting in pre-K, they do some of these assessments with kids who are, like too young to even talk. So the teacher is filling it out, looking at the kid they've known for 5 minutes. Yeah. And so what concerns me is that we've got the teachers who are going to be comfortable with that are not you guys. They're not the good ones. They're not the white hats. The teachers are like, yes, they're
no. Well, I want to say that is I don't think that's most people though. I think that it's, for most people, it's just go along to get along, and that's where your money's coming from. I mean, even I can feel it for sure. Like, I mean, I gave up my job, right, for not complying with the vaccine mandates. Right. And I know a lot of people who didn't want to get it, but did because that was their source of income. And then now that I'm an independent contractor, I can feel it, right? Sometimes when I'm like working with somebody, there's some things that I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say this thing because that person also funds this, so like, I think a lot of it just has to do with where your money's coming from, what you built yourself up to be. And are there some people who I think are like, sociopaths who just want to kind of have a lot of control and that's what feeds them? Yeah. But I think that most of the people, Ray, who you work with, who didn't stand up by your side, they're just being good people. They're just good people. It's the good person syndrome.
Well, yeah, the tragedy of the commons, where everybody is making a rational decision for themselves as an individual. Like, I got to keep my job.
In the short term.
But in the aggregate, it ends up manifesting as something quite dark. And what I'm concerned about, as I was starting to say, is that the kids coming up now, they wouldn't be able to recognize a good teacher if they encountered one. So in other words, if you're taught from the age of 3 or 4 or 5 to be thin-skinned, as Ray pointed out, or to wallow in to identify with your anxiety or whatever other trauma that somebody tells you have. By the time you get to 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, you have any one of you guys as a teacher, this kid is not going to be like, you guys are not going to just be that strict teacher. You're going to be, you're harming me. Oh my God.
Oh, they hated
you
me.
expect
They
me to do
hated
my
me,
homework?
Deb. They hated
What?
me in the first quarter. They hated me in the first quarter.
And then they
hated
loved
my
you.
butt.
And
then
they loved you.
halfway through the second semester, they're like, "You're the best teacher we've ever."
Right, because they yearn it. They yearn the structure.
Oh, this is so good.
They yearn it.
Okay, this is great. So what you guys are pointing out that is so fantastic. I'm so glad to hear this. I hope everybody in the audience took note of that. So there's Deb being all negative, like, well, it's all hope is lost. They'll be turned into these little thin skin. And they're saying, no, good teaching, good academic teaching is the best antidote to it. So there's a lesson there, I think, which is that mental health care in school is just school. Like, just teach the kids stuff. Like, teach them things, make them, help them be competent, help them feel like they're actually effective at what they're there for. You're like taking my childhood and sticking me in a building. Can it please mean something? Can it actually matter? Can I walk out of here smarter today than I was when I arrived in the morning? I think is a better antidote to any kind of anxiety you might have about life.
Right.
Then
what do you do when you go to the
about your
gym?
anxiety.
What do you do when you go to the gym? You tear your muscles, right? You know, if you want to make something not fragile, you actually have to rip it up. You have to, put something into it, and then it builds back and it gets stronger. And then you tear it up and it builds up and it builds up stronger. So yeah, like, you have to do hard things.
But we started to talk about the professional development and what this does to you guys as professionals, but we kind of switched off of that. And I want to come back to it briefly because I bet people in the audience are thinking, because I know I've just seen it, we need good teachers. We need clone you guys. But the teacher education, though, is already geared so much to this stuff about safety and inclusion and belonging and SEL and whatever, that we no longer have subject matter experts. We don't, and even if you say, well, I'm not really a subject matter expert, but I bet you guys all took, actual child development, Piaget and all this, things where you actually know what the developmental phases are and aren't going to just pretend they don't exist and they're little miniature adults and project all of your adult feelings onto them, but also some kind of instructional design, some kind of, understanding of that I probably shouldn't experiment on my students in ways that could be permanent. You experiment with a lesson, but I'm not going to teach an experimental theory as fact.
Right.
Maybe I shouldn't do that. So we're teaching the whole new crop of teachers that all this stuff that you guys are going, yeah, that's bunk. We're teaching a whole new crop of teachers that it's true. And then they'll go into the classroom. And so, how do we change, or what would you recommend to change about teacher education and professional development to produce more of you guys and fewer of them?
I would just give up on it. Seriously, it's all garbage. It's such garbage.
You want to change something?
Yes.
Let me help you with this. Really easy. Ready? Okay. Yes. No more student teaching. Intern teaching only. You have to survive the first year. Go survive it.
Well, that's what I did in graduate school. That's what we did. Yeah. I mean, they called it student teaching, but it was a whole year. Yeah.
Yeah. No classes like you take a methods class in the evening, or a child development class would be useful. But you should just go and work and have a supervising teacher who isn't just there collecting the $2,000 for the supervising teacher and then leaving to have extended coffee breaks, but they're actually reviewing your lesson plans and they're actually watching you teach. And then you're immediately debriefing at the end of the day. Here's what I saw that was good. Here's what I saw that didn't go well. Are you sure about this approach? Why did you pick that curricular resource versus another one? What was your thinking? And kind of actually coaching them, not bullcrap TOSA, teacher on special assignment. I'm going to teach you something. Sorry.
You're so harsh, DT. You're so harsh.
Because I'm so cynical. I'm so burnt out on all this crap. Look, if you can survive it, then you can keep growing. But you can't be this, I'm sorry that I feel this way, but
that whiskey, Paul.
statistically, we're dumb. Teachers are dumb. We're poor performers in college. We're soft majors. When we realize, oh no, there is no air conditioned job that will pay me $100,000 a year for my, African dance studies class. So like, I'm going to have to become a PE teacher. And so then they do become a PE teacher. And then they're like, but now I've got to, I always say my Hawaiian cousins, job for life, brah. Like once you make it past the second year in California, you're tenured, baby. You're done. And so that's the problem. Is like, you need to burn these people, burn through them, and then get them out. And that's the other, the bigger issue. If I could change one law, it's always going to be the compulsory attendance laws. If you take those away, if you say, no, you don't have to send your kid in. Like if you can take that away, then all of a sudden kids are going to be like, well, I'm only going to the classes that matter to me. And I'm only going to do this if it matters. And then all of a sudden the schools actually have to be good. They have to perform. But I mean, that's like, again, that's such pie in the sky right now. I mean, that's why I was laughing. And Paul's right. Like it's just full. I have a friend right now who's on an emergency credential, and she is a pro in her field, absolute, published, brilliant, wonderful, has an amazing CV. And she's in these classes and she's like, this is poison. This is absolute poison. And she's not conservative at all. And she's like, this is poison.
The worst thing about it, okay, is that there are actual kids coming out of college that want to be teachers, that go into these programs. And my niece knows that these girls from her sorority, they want to be teachers. They went in and they all dropped out because they hated it, because it was garbage. And so now it's now a filter, which is actively keeping out, not all of them may be great teachers, but it's keeping out the ones that know it's crap, so that only the ones who pass through the filter go into the system.
Right. Isn't that a win? Because schools will be so unbelievably, irredeemably bad that only parents on drugs will keep.
If you want to be an accelerationist, then yeah,
you are an extremist.
Which I might be in your camp. I just think like what's so maddening is we know what works. Like we've known what works for
3,000 plus years.
I know.
Like what the hell are we doing?
The whole thing is so corrupt. But what I think what really needs, we need to have schools that do it right. Maybe charter schools or private schools, and they become like this. They become the city on the hill, and then it becomes so painfully obvious what works, and to hold it up as an example. So maybe I'm ambivalent about school choice, but maybe there's a way to do that so that everything else looks so horrible by comparison that you just can't even justify it anymore.
Right.
Well, Deb, can I offer some positive?
Please.
Not that you guys are negative. That K-hole of despair.
I'm optimistic though.
Oh, good. Okay.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Okay, so Stephanie, really, I just retired after 25 years. Yes, I'm an old man, but one of the nicest things about, well, there really isn't that much nice about being old, but is that I've been in the same community. So the families know me, the children know me. My students are in middle school and high school, and they come back and so forth. And so what I've been doing, working with some parent groups, is one of the things we want to do is set up a podcast, very short podcasts, maybe 5-10 minutes, aimed at the high school students to teach them how to stand up for themselves, and also to inform parents about some of these activities that go on in classrooms so that they can work with their kids. For example, just to give you one example to fight the CRT and the DIE and the transgender ideology and all of this stuff, is one of the things that Glendale has been trying to do is introduce the privilege walk. And I don't know if you guys know what the privilege walk is.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so do you know, Paul, what the privilege walk is?
We used to do those on Zoom, which is really wild.
Okay.
So kids, they would turn your screen off if you have this, okay? And then the last kids left.
Right.
Would be the kids that had nothing.
Right. So
okay. You think about that during COVID. fucking insane is that?
Right.
Anyway, go
But
ahead.
if we can, I have reached some of my students and talking to them, if we can show them, so this is what's going to happen. There's this thing going to be called a privilege walk. And you're going to need to say things like, or such as, well, what you're doing is you're showing everybody starts at the same place and there's one winner. But life isn't like that. There isn't one winner in life. Everyone can win in life. I could go over to this community and pull a lot of very poor white kids and go over to this community where we have lots of middle class and upper class Black kids, and you get a completely different set of results. And what is the good of this? What is this supposed to achieve? To say that we all start in different places? Well, we already know that. That's what freedom means. Freedom means we all start in different places. And it's not an issue of blame. And it's not an issue of privilege. It's just an issue of, if you were lucky enough to be born in this particular family with loving parents or whatever. And life is not a race. It is not a race. And you are not competing against other people. You are only competing against yourself. And teach the adolescents to reject this, or to say, I've actually said this, maybe I shouldn't say this in public, but I've told some of my boys who've come back to me in high school, I said, if a teacher comes up to you and says there are more than two genders and they are going to discipline you if you disagree with them, you say there are only two genders. That's science. That is the settled science. Whatever you want to believe, you can believe it. And if you try to discipline me, I'm gonna go to the principal and say you touched my butt. I'm gonna go to the police. I don't
know. I wouldn't tell them to falsify things. I mean, I like the inoculation though aspect. I like the debunking or even pre-bunking in this case, right before they have the experience of seeing the thing. I think
here's
that's
the challenge that I've had with teenagers and extra stuff, like anything that would be on the, because I've had parents ask me, like, could we start a thing like what Ray just described? And I work with teens, and one of the things that shocks me is they get really good grades. Yeah, I mean, A's are ubiquitous at this point, even for extremely mediocre work. And so I've lost count of how many teens will say, why should I do that? I'm an AP student. I'm getting A's. I have a 4.0 GPA. I'm not going to do extra school. And even they don't see, we've set things up to be everything's about getting into college or everything's about getting a job. So they don't even they don't even have a desire or a curiosity to learn something. I mean, I'm not saying all students, but
I think it's better maybe for the parents, right?
Yeah,
like the
parents,
podcast would be for the parents, and then the parents can have the conversations with their children.
They could try.
Rather than having the kid. Yeah, I mean, I have my kid is still 7, so I have the luxury of like having his attention, Yeah.
You would think that my kids would, be like, I mean, some of the thoughts were aligned, and others I'll be like, didn't you see, did it? And it's like, oh, Mom, I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah, but sometimes it doesn't matter though, right? Sometimes they're going to tell you that to your face. They hear the thing, and then they get in front of their friends and they say the script that you gave them or whatever it is. So, I mean, I don't know, obviously I don't know your kids or your dynamics, but I definitely feel like that's a thing where they're like, oh, that's so stupid. And then they actually go do it.
I offered free tutoring to some of the teens that I work with for essay writing. I said, school year's coming. One of the benefits you have of working with me and that I have a job where I work with you guys all the time is that I'm a tutor. I specialize in writing and helping kids with their writing. And they all looked at me like, yeah, we don't need that. And I said, oh, that's great. And, I said, you're doing well in writing. They're like, no, we just use ChatGPT. Yeah. Like they were saying, I'll just have a Coke.
Well,
can I problematize this? Like, I do want to talk. I really want to speak to this.
Okay, just a second. DT, can I jump in just quickly?
Sure, go right.
Deb, I cannot tell you how many of my former students come to me and they want to resist this stuff. They just don't know how.
Okay.
I've been on several local podcasts, and they come up to me on the street, in the grocery store. They say, "Thank you, Mr. Shelton. We're on your side. We're against this stuff." And
that's heartening.
How do we fight it? And if it's the boys, it would not be that difficult to get a bunch of in my community get like 10 of the boys to all of a sudden put up their hands and say, I hereby swear that I'm now a girl, and go into the girls' locker room to cause, just to get the news. There are a lot of rebellious teens who are quite happy if they knew how to do this safely so that they don't,
become ungovernable.
Ungovernable.
Yeah.
There is an opportunity for us to reach the students in terms of teaching them how to defend themselves, because a lot of them do know they're being conned. Not all of them are falling prey. So sorry about that, DT.
Oh no, I was just gonna I'll piggyback on what you said. It's really simple for me. When I look at most of my students, they're playing a game. They're very good at it. The AP students are exceptionally good at it. The normal sort of like regular college prep students are okay at it. But the bottom line is, when you have, what you really need to work on is the parents. I agree. And I'm writing in the middle. I'm in the middle of writing a very long strategy book of how to deal with activist teachers for the parent side. And these are like 5,000 word essays. I apologize. I'm so sorry, but we're dealing with an insane system. So I feel like I have to kind of get granular, but the reality is, as long as parents want good grades, you're not going to get the kids pushed back. Parents have to get on board with that my kid might get a B or a C or a D. And what I will tell you about that, at least in my school, is I had a parent tell me that her son during COVID was totally checked out in gaming, and he got 2 Ds in his U.S. history class. And this is a rich family. Okay, so they want their kid into college, and a good one, right? So he had 2 Ds, and here's what I'm going to tell all you parents out there who are afraid of bad grades. He had 2 Ds. Well, he went on the online credit recovery that is offered by the school district, and he got 2 A's to make up for those 2 semesters of D's in 3 hours on one Saturday. 3 hours. Because online credit recovery is all searchable. Every test is searchable. You can go right to the test. If you have a phone, you can search the answers. If you're willing to pay a little bit of money to, like, I can't think of the names of the websites, but it's like,
but also they're
like Course
easy.
Hero.
They're just super easy. You can just like really jam through them pretty quickly. I've seen them.
Yeah. So, but you can literally go on, just have your phone out, go to the test, take a picture of the phone, do a search, a reverse photo search, Google, and find the answer. And he finished a year of U.S. history in 3 hours with 2 A's, which replaced the grades on his transcript. So I don't even know why you give a crap about their grades at this point. Because if I haven't demonstrated with that statement that grades are almost totally meaningless at this point, then you can go and read my blog, and I'll talk to you more about why your kids are learning nothing. I've written like 5 different pieces on your kids aren't learning because teachers aren't content experts. They're not reading anymore. Tests mean it's pointless. And my favorite, grading for equity or equitable grading practices, have rendered the whole process of turning anything in or assigning anything almost totally moot. And most of our school districts have adopted these policies in, the quest for equity or ESG scores or whatever the hell we're doing now. But the whole point of me saying all that is, you have an incentive structure in schools that makes it very costly to fight and very easy to just go with the flow. So I agree that most kids don't believe this bull crap. They're just like, I'm just going to repeat what this activist teacher says. And then I have this conservative teacher over here, so I'm going to follow his line in that class. And I'm going to say what this one says in this class. And they know we're not, like, we're transparent. Some of us are actively transparent. Like, hey, this is my bias. I always said that. I'm like, look, I'm biased towards capitalism and freedom, and I hate communism. So I'm just going to tell you that up front. If you want to send me something to read, an alternative viewpoint, I will, and we can discuss it. But I'm just telling you that's my bias. And they would be like, okay. And it was fine. And we had a very productive course. But basically, kids know how to play this game. They're playing it. And that's a positive, guys. I want you to take that. Parents, all of you parents, this is a positive. Just because your kid goes to school, although I question the worth of you sending them to school for 7 hours a day at this point, because what the hell are they getting out of it? Just because your kid goes to school 7 hours a day does not mean they're being necessarily indoctrinated. Okay. Your kid, if you've done your job as a parent and taught them things, and you talk to them and you debrief with them at night, and you say, hey, what insane thing happened at school today? They'll tell you. They want to tell you. It's funny. It's stupid. And you can laugh about it together. And you can be like, you know why that's stupid, right? And they're like, yeah, it's funny, right? Well, and so your kid may be okay. But again, I do want to say this. I say this to parents a lot. If you send your kid to Rome, don't be surprised when he comes home a Roman. So
Right.
that's the risk that you're taking.
Because I
Right.
think
Pretty
that
big one.
okay, even if they're all right, they're not totally convinced. I feel like it's sort of like the Obama thing, right? Obama, when I was 18, I could have voted for him. And everybody around, Obama, right? Everybody loves him. It was just in the culture. It was so that's what I fear is that, you know, they might not totally be with it, but you get swept up in the culture. These are the good guys. Yep. These are the bad guys, because you just generally get programmed to those things. And then you don't even know to ask certain questions. And it's also about becoming the compliant nature of things. I do want to speak like on the parent thing. I can't speak to older kids, like parents of older kids, but, you know, of the younger kids, 7, 8, you know, and even younger than 7, really, 9, 10. Get your kids off the screens, the TVs, the tablets, the phones, the video game devices, the Switch ones. I know a lot of kids have those. Take it away and just say no. No, there's no screen. We don't do screens. That's it. Right. And, you know, I'm not saying none at all. We watch a little bit of TV. I give them an hour on Saturday and Sunday. That's independent. And then in the evenings, you know, if I feel like watching TV or if we have time, we might watch a program together. But other than that, we don't watch screens. My son has been occupying himself without a screen, right? Him and his little friend playing, and they just get used to it. And I think that they build up so much resilience. They build up so much mental fortitude, and then they don't get as much. They get some from the culture, right? You know, my son was asking about, can we watch Titanic a couple weeks ago? He picked that up from the culture. But I just think the screen should be viewed like cigarettes. Like, you wouldn't let your kid smoke a cigarette, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't let your kid drink a beer, you know, like, again, maybe when they're 16, 17, 18, these things change a little bit. But that's just my piece. Get your kids off the screens.
All right. I think we have to say bye to Paul. He's got a bolt. And I want to thank you, Paul, for joining us. I really appreciate it. Please tell people where they can find you. Yeah,
thanks, Deb, for having me. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Paul D. Rossi, just like it is on the screen. And this is a great discussion. I admire everybody here. We're doing great stuff, and I will second what Stephanie said. I think that a school is not functioning unless they take the phones when they walk in the door.
Right.
And they give
and
them
the
back
Chromebooks aren't helping much either.
And and just throw,
that's the other
we have
reason
to get back to I have to argue with people that kids should learn multiplication tables. Okay. This is where we are now. So,
but why? You can just Google the answer.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Bye, Paul.
Bye, Paul.
One thing that I wanted to touch on, based on some of the stuff that you're saying, Stephanie, and also even some of the things that like everybody else has said, as far as the mental health, I think that the elephant in the room is that this mental health so-called crisis that they want to treat in the school with the community schooling and the whole child wraparound, MTSS, SEL, Castle junk, okay, is not allowing people to see that perhaps school itself, not its existence, but like some of the practices that go on there, some of the pedagogies, but also the system and the way the system functions, not teachers per se, are iatrogenic. They are feeding that beast. Not that they necessarily cause all of it. Okay. But if you take a kid who's going through natural puberty, okay, it's puberty with there's anxiety with just normal growing up.
Boy, they dress like a boy.
Yeah,
I literally look at pictures of me. I look like a little boy when I was in like 4th, 5th, 6th,
so
grade.
Something natural is occurring, and now you go into a school, and rather than bumping into one of these fine friends here on our screen as your teacher, or maybe you have them for one period and then the other periods are the purple haired people. So you don't get like immersed in, Stephanie and Ray and Ramona and DT. And so you've got already confused. Then you're exposed to that. Then you're exposed to the internet and social media. But we do talk about the screens, but then the parents are like, but then I send them to school and there's a screen and there's Google and there's Dojo and, Class Dojo. And then the teacher's sending things home via text. And then they're telling my kid about an app, or they're telling my kid about a thing online that they should go to, like, Amaze sex videos for CSE and all these things. And so they're saying, we're going to help with the mental health. And I'm like, stop helping. I feel like the thing that we aren't really talking about as much is how all of this, not us here, but in the country, how all of this emphasis on making school the center of all things is itself feeding the problem. That pulling kids farther away from their real community. Community is by choice. Community is not this network by zip code that the government assigned you to. That's a network. I mean, John Taylor Gatto talked about that a lot, and I agree with him. Community is what you build, or what your parents help you build, and your friends and things like that. That's organic. So they're pulling them away from that for all those hours a day for 13 years, pulling away from the parents who, really having a good relationship with your family of origin, even if they're not a mom and a dad, if it's just a mom, or if it's just a dad, or it's grandma and grandpa, whoever it is that has more of a familial bond with you than, again, someone who is assigned to take care of you for 8 hours a day. I just think that in itself can compromise mental health. Even a strong kid is up against it with just those things. And I don't know. Am I crazy? Like, do you guys?
No, that's exactly. I think that's right. I mean, I pulled my son. There's no way I could have my son going to the schools. And the big thing for me was because he was, kindergarten, first grade, was the screens. They were already giving them one-to-one devices, and it wasn't, I wasn't so worried about some of the other stuff that didn't really start until third grade. But for me, it was the screens. And the fact that they don't teach the kids to read, there's that. But now that I pulled him and we have our community of, homeschooling community, some of the kids actually do still go to public school, but some of them don't. But I do feel like my life revolves around our little school, but we built that community. We made those communities. We're choosing to be there rather than it being this thing that you're assigned to by the government. If you truly do have a small community school, when you go to some of these towns and their graduating class is 30 kids, I think that you probably still can really have that small town vibe, even though it's sort of in the system, right? But because it's just so small, the systematic factors can't get in there. But I definitely think it is. It has to just do with the organic versus the inorganic nature of things, right? It's the unaccounted for factor, the factor that cannot be, held. It's intangible, it's uncountable. That's the thing that's missing. I just don't think
raising children scales.
Right.
I think there's a point at which you have too many kids from diverse backgrounds. It was they come from very different households and so forth. And you hit a kind of scalability wall where you're no longer able to give them what you just described, even if you have the best intentions in the world, because it's just a numbers game at that point. And then that creates these incentives, like you were talking about, Stephanie, for all these top-down players to come in with their solutions.
Right.
Here, you'll scale it because we'll give them screens. You'll scale it because we're going to document and do data, and then AI is going to feed them the lesson. You don't have to lesson plan for 30 kids. We'll do it for you.
And that's really what mental health is, right? It's being disembodied from yourself, not connected, like Ray, how you said, with the humanity that's within you. So I think that you can see it. It's reverberated at all these different levels from the system, through us being disconnected in our communities, through our children's mental health being disconnected.
Right. And they're just hollow. So, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to bring in that, if we look at, everyone understands there's a crisis with young Black men, right? Because the family structure isn't there. The community structure isn't there. But what do all those young Black men have? They all have public school, right? So like, I want to say causation there, but I just want to make it clear that like, if all you have is public school and they're trying to divorce more and more, the school is intruded. This is a John Taylor Gatto thing too, right? The school is intruding more and more into the family time, right? So you have to do after school sports, and then you have to, because you got to go to college, and then you have a million hours of homework, and you have to do all this stuff with talking to the teacher and posting on the thing and doing a project and talking to other people about the project that you're working on, right? And so there's less and less time for the family. And obviously the families are under enormous stress financially, economically right now. And that's probably across the board. And you particularly see it in at-risk kids. They're really divorced from their parents. And so they glom onto these teachers. But, you know, and I will say this unapologetically, a teacher only has that kid for 180 days. In high school, 180 hours, right? And somehow we're expected to fix their problems and care about them. We're actually offering sometimes to help them with life changes that will affect them well for the rest of their lives, really. And we only know them for 180 hours. And the system seems, you know, bound and determined to separate kids from their parents. And whether it's through SEL lessons or teaching them that their parents are inherently racist or they're bigots, or maybe they don't know they're bigots, but they're bigots nonetheless because of X, Y, and Z, or they don't accept you exactly as you are and you have to be dishonest with them. That's okay. We can hide that from them. All of these things are designed to sort of break the family apart and create a child that is dependent on the state and dependent on the adults. And that's where whole school, whole community, the WSCC model is coming in, right? You don't need parents anymore. You don't need parents. The state will take care of all of it. But what it does is it leaves children unmoored. They are unmoored. They are free floating. There's no dock. There's a storm. Everything's scary. And they have nothing to hold on to. And that's what I think, like, and when I think back to the worst schools that I taught at, what I provided, and I couldn't do it as a parent. I couldn't parent all of those kids. But what I provided through the literature and through the history and through those studies, that gave them moorings. That gave them an anchor. And that, I think largely that's why the schools have moved away from sort of the classics, the canon, the Western lit, because it gives you an anchor to hold on to when everything around you is like insane clown world, which we're living in, right? And if you don't have a great relationship with your parents, you need those things. But if you can deny those things to kids systematically and then teach them that their parents are irrelevant and or actually harmful to them, then they're just going to turn back to the state. And I think that is the goal. You know, Ray, I did say, you know, never attribute to malice what you can say is based on stupidity. I didn't necessarily mean that I think they're stupid. I think there's a lot of useful idiots in the education system. And I think that's most teachers and most administrators. Are there certainly evil people at the top of this chain that are pushing these things down through federal policy like ESSA, which ESSA was a beautiful thing for all these psycho megalomaniacs, because what it said was there are other ways to measure success of schools other than academic proficiency, right?
Exactly.
So like, you don't need academic. Who needs academic proficiency? We can say our students
get
feel
the money.
safe. They feel safe, and the SEL surveys will help us know when they're not feeling safe, and that's even more money, right? So all of these things are this horrible, evil web. And I think the only way we get out is through real education. And whether you're kind of a John Taylor Gatto who's like, I'm going to do all the necessary work to individualize education for my 30 middle school students, which he was a master of, or you're like trying to leaning on like a classical, or even like, I love Edie Hirsch's Core Knowledge series because it's about cultural literacy. You give the kids an anchor and then they can make decisions and they have a harbor in the storm. And ideally that would come from the family. But, you know, obviously I think, you know, we're at this horrible cultural moment where people are really struggling and families are really struggling. And maybe what we can do as good teachers, for all these teachers, if any teachers are listening, make your classroom a haven of sanity and literacy and vocabulary, and teach them things that they probably can't learn at home and definitely won't learn from the culture. And they will appreciate it. Maybe not right now, but they will at some point recognize what you did for them. And that doesn't just help them. It helps the future. It helps their families and it helps our communities.
Right.
Thank you for
now, I know that
listening to our
Ramona has to go, and I'm sure all of you are needing to go. So we're going to say bye to Ramona, and then we'll wrap up because I am sure everybody else here has lives to get on with. So Ramona, thank you so much for coming and
Thanks
for
a lot
sharing your story
having
with
me. I
us
really
and your
appreciate
wisdom.
Hang in there, Ramona.
it so much.
Yeah.
I will. And I just want to say one thing. Guard your children. That's 3 things. And we need to disband the U.S. Department of Education. Useless. Okay?
I
Here.
agree.
Parting words.
I wasn't going to vote for president. I was like, I'm so cynical about it, but I'm going with Ramona 2024.
Good.
And
Thank
Ray
you.
is
Bye,
her vice.
Ramona. Thank you. Thank
Bye-bye.
No,
you.
Ray DOJ. I need him head of DOJ. He needs to
There
be
we go. There we go.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
All
All
right,
right.
thank
So
you.
bye.
Bye,
Thanks.
Ramona.
Bye, Ramona.
Okay, so to finish off this, the darker side of using school to do mental health, what if each of you could just come up with kind of like a parting thought on why, answer the question, why is school the wrong place to diagnose and treat mental illness? So I think we've talked around it and different things, but like your last thought of like, why is this not a good idea? And we'll just go each person say something.
I mean, mental illness is very serious, and it's something that should be dealt with by a trained professional. And teachers are trained professionals, but they're supposed to be trained professionals in teaching, not in like, assessing your mental health and giving out, diagnoses and things like that. If a kid is truly in need of mental health, like, can we please get them the resources they need and not pretend that a teacher in a classroom is going to be the solution? So there's that. And then I think the other thing is just the teachers are meant to teach, and you can't have good mental health if you don't understand what's going on in the world around you. If you can't read, if you can't write, if you can't do math, and you can't comprehend, how can you have good mental health? So that's my last word.
I agree. Okay. Next. Let's go next.
Well, I'll sort of piggyback with Stephanie, and that is simply to say this. Mental disorders are real. They also are generally rare, and they're serious. So if you encounter childhood schizophrenia, which I actually had a child in my class, and eventually he was diagnosed as having schizophrenia or anorexia nervosa or some other real mental illness. That is something that belongs outside of the teaching environment, because if you really care for that particular child, the support that they need cannot be found in schools. That really does require serious intervention. So all of these things that they're calling mental disorders aren't. They're actually in a different category and should be completely separated from educating.
Yeah. Okay. DT?
The biggest problem we have as educators is mission creep. So if we were just sticking to what we were supposed to do and had a solid curriculum, and that's a big if, then we would sort of end run these problems, because we would be giving the kids what they need to not be mentally ill or depressed. They'd feel competent and confident that they could do real things that matter in life, and they know things about their world that matter and that will help them understand the world around them. And if we were doing that job, I believe we would see mental illness, anxiety, all of these sort of symptoms of general malaise and the illness in our culture, those would fall back, and you would create strong adults and strong citizens that understand the value of what this amazingly rare opportunity we have, having been born in or naturalized in the United States, that we can be free and own property and live our lives as we choose, so long as we don't harm other people. But until schools get freaking back in their damn lane and do their job and not try to parent everybody and say, oh, well, you don't have parents. I mean, and I feel bad for my students that had terrible parents. And I had lots of kids with horrifyingly bad home situations, right? But I can't effectively parent that kid. And you can't have me with that kid for 18 years or like for 13 years at their school. That's never going to happen. So it needs to be that the schools do what they're meant to do well. And that we bring back that accountability to the schools. And also, again, we need to bring it back for the students themselves. Grades should mean something, and behavior has to be good. And parents need a little bit of accountability check too here. Like, are you supporting your kid? Are you making sure they do their homework? Are you checking their grades? And are you sure that to the extent that you're able to, you're teaching them behaviors that will be conducive to learning in the classroom? And if we could all get in our lanes, re-education, then you would have a functional school system like we did really. We arguably had one, even though the progressives grabbed at one in the 20s. Like, it was still working through probably the 60s, early 60s. It was still turning out decent human beings.
I mean, even in the 90s, into the 90s, they were like closing the gap or whatever, anyways, I had a mom leave me a comment and being like, "Oh, look, the NAEP scores are just like they were in the 90s." I was like, in the 90s, we were on an upward trend when they were that. Right. Score.
Exactly.
Now we're on a downward trend. Two totally different things.
Right. And we can't
right over her head. So
yeah, and you can't blame everything on COVID policy and closed schools. I think that just sort of exposed a downward trend that was already happening.
Yeah, amplified it. It just
yeah. We discovered what they're doing with reading. And if I may, I want to add to this. I am not a classroom teacher. I was a classroom teacher for a very short period of time, but I did do the year that DT describes. I did my training, because I didn't go to teacher college. I went to college for liberal arts, or American studies specifically, and which is kind of literature and history mushed together. When I decided to become a teacher, I went to University of Pennsylvania, and that was their program. The program was, you're going to teach for a year and you're going to take some classes at night. And we took child development, and we took, science, and we took English, and it were the teaching of English, for example, English and literature to children, the teaching of science, the teaching of math. And even then I was sort of sad there wasn't as much instructional design as I would have liked, although we did have to write lesson plans, and we did have to go in the class every single day and do things. And the master teacher did watch us. Plus we had an advisor besides who would come in and watch us, and we had to keep journals. Anyway, the point is, while not being a classroom teacher, I feel like I've tutored enough students and have, homeschooled my own kids and work with teens now. And what I would say I've observed is everything you've said, but also a new trend, which is that the diagnoses that are happening are things that actually aren't mental illness. So when I've had students, let's say a tutoring student who's a little on the quirky side, okay? And there are many reasons that this could be. They're just, whatever. They're
some people are quirky. That's just the way it is. I mean, we put up with you, Deb.
That's right. So they're a little quirky, and they're not very outgoing. Let's say we once upon a time called them shy. Now we just know that they might be introverted, or whether they pick their friends very carefully. And you find that they end up being diagnosed with things, diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, even though they've never harmed a flea. Like, antisocial personality disorder has a definition, and you really are like aggressive. Okay. But they're defining people as things that they, in my opinion, I'm not a shrink or anything, but they don't have. They're just different. They're just not like super emotive and outgoing and smiling all the time and whatever. So introverts are turning,
they just have like a little bit more energy than normal. I just like the overdiagnosis of ADD and ADHD. It's like, yeah,
exactly.
My son goes pretty nuts too when you try to make him sit in one place for more than 15 or 20 minutes. Like,
especially boys.
Yeah.
So I think one of the dark sides of all this is, like I said at the outset, where what you seek, you'll find. If there's money to be had when you found it. So if like your job depends on you finding something, you're probably going to find it, or you're going to rename something that isn't it. You're going to call it that thing. Now add ideology. So now add, okay, this kid is a devout Catholic. Parents are Catholic. Kid goes to school. And kid mentions in passing that they're Catholic, or they're doing an intersectionality test, and they're, a little gauge, and they say that they're Catholic and they believe in God, or they believe that, abortion's wrong, whatever it is that they say they believe. Or the teacher doesn't even ask them what they believe, it just finds out they're Catholic and makes a bunch of assumptions. That they'll classify this child as having something wrong with them if they push back. So if they say, no, well, this is the right way to think and be to be a good person, in other words, that goes against your religious views, let's say, then, well, that's a problem, and we're going to need to deal with that. And you need to speak with the counselor about being more inclusive and, accommodating to other people, when in fact, no, they just have a difference of opinion. Like you were saying about, kids just solving their own problems. And, I'll meet you outside at 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock high. Does anyone remember that movie, or am I dating myself? Anyway, like this is how it used to happen. And now it's like, well, you're Catholic and so over there is, something that presumably Catholics don't like, or it doesn't have to be Catholic. It could be Muslim. It could be whatever. But somebody who just doesn't fit this progressive mold of, what inclusion and belonging defines. And therefore you have a problem. Oh, you're white and you resist being called an oppressor? Well, we need to have a talk about your antisocial personality disorder. Your shyness is now a problem. So I think they're looking at personality traits that are desirable in this new matrix of, Agenda 2030 and the SDG goals and all that stuff. And what I fear is going to happen, especially when they get hold of the honeypot of money that comes from Medicaid and S-chip, and any pushback from a kid may be deemed a diagnosis. Yeah. And they might be referred for services because they want the money. So I think they're going to be looking for diagnoses. And why not get some social justice in the mix? Yeah. Maybe that sounds very conspiratorial on my part, but I think that bias that runs deep in those disciplines, social work, school counselors, school administrators.
Right. It's just weaponized empathy, right? Yeah. I mean, I think especially teaching is a heavily female profession. I mean, at the lower levels, especially, I think like when you get up higher, it's a little bit more mixed. But I do like women are very, we want to be there. We have a lot of empathy. We want to be, and that's what makes us really great, like moms and really great friends and really great teachers as well. Like it did. And I'm not trying to, I know she's sexist, this and that, but I think it can be weaponized. It can be taken advantage of, and that's what I see happening, is that just on a massive scale, the goodness of teachers is being weaponized to make them feel like they're really helpful and this and that. But unfortunately,
it's so hard. Every time I do one of these shows, I always feel bad for the audience, because a lot of them will be like, well, what are we supposed to do now? What do we do?
I mean,
read
I don't
my
think
blog. You'll be fine.
Also, I think that people should be, I know it's scary to like, well, if I don't put them in the public school, what am I going to do? Like, you can actually create on a small scale. So you can't scale up really large to these $2,000 schools, but you can create a nice little economy of scale of 10 people, of 5 people, where you're pooling your money and you can hire a teacher for a few hours a day or whatever it is. And so even people who are not the most, don't have money flying off of trees all around them, it actually is much more within your reach than I think most people think. And once you get your little group together, then you can really start to be like, okay, you take them that day, I'll take them this day. They have the program for those other days, and you can I work full time, so I think that's the hope. And then something like Ray, where he's trying to, get out the pre-bunking, the antidote sort of to these
pre-bunking
things.
I like it.
Yeah, the pre-bunking, things like that. So I definitely think there's hope, but obviously you have to know the beast. You have to know what the darkness is to be able to shed light on it.
Can we examine to our premises here? Because I do think, I know Deb and I have talked about this before, but homeschooling is probably what we need to do. We need to be more independent. Basically, we need to decentralize as much as possible. Is the real issue here. There's too much power concentrated in the hands of the state. So I ideally, as who I am, I think decentralized. And for all those parents who are afraid of homeschooling, I just want you to examine why you think you can't do it. And what if I told you, insert the Matrix meme, right? What if I told you that that you feel like you're incompetent because you went to shitty public schools?
Yeah.
What if I told you that they taught you that you're too dumb, that they did it quietly and implicitly, but they gave you the message that you can't handle
Homeschoolers are
anything.
weirdos.
Oh, I don't
They're
care.
so weird. That was
okay,
like
you can't say that. That's racist.
Said the blue-haired.
Stop.
No, I'm just
Stephanie,
saying for so long, like
No.
that's what it was just like it's programmed in us. Homeschoolers are weirdos.
No, Stephanie, it's racist now because I think it's up to 15% of Black families are homeschooling now. So for you to say homeschoolers,
So wait,
are
do I
weird
get to
is-
count in that statistic though? Because my son is biracial. So does that count?
Well, is he more white?
Yes.
If he's white and Black, that's a problem because the white would oppress the Black half, right? So he's more white than Black. I'm just saying. I'm just doing the math. But my point is, like, listen, stop. You got to believe in yourself. And also, like, I mean, I'm not in love with Elon Musk. I mean, if he gave me some money, I'd be okay with it. But, like, he is providing you this platform to reach out to people like me and Deb
For
and
now.
Ray and Stephanie.
I know.
It's
It's
Maybe
the
all-
X. It's
I
going to be
know.
your
I saw
bank
the-
and your shopping list and everything. I told people this was coming. I told people this was coming.
I saw the X and I was like, oh, that's such a bad metaphor. Like, we're not going to be here anymore. Like, you're Xing us out. Why are you doing this? Anyway, my point was this. You have these platforms where you can reach out to people and say, can anybody help? And there's so many people who want to help. I reached out to my tiny follower base and said, hey, are any of you guys homeschoolers? Would you be okay if I put you on a list and then shared that list with people who are looking at homeschooling? They could ask you questions and stuff. And like, within like 20 minutes with my tiny follower account, I think I had like 100 and something people who were like, we did it, we'll help, right? And so, and you know, even though the Library Association is now run by an avowed Marxist, like your local librarian, if you say, hey, we're trying to learn about photosynthesis, can you get some books for us?
Well,
They'll
y'all are
probably
very
do
happy
it.
to know. You'll be very
Yeah.
happy to know that as of today, there's a new national association launched to compete with the American Library Association.
Oh, nice.
Excellent.
The,
Excellent.
yes,
So-
the life work of Dan Kleinman. So that's happening.
Good.
The other thing that I love is a comeback to the teachers, the cohort of teachers who love to say, you parents are too dumb to homeschool. You can't teach your own kids. You're not a trained teacher. My favorite comeback to them is, really? You guys taught us.
Yeah.
You're the ones who taught us. We're not smart enough to teach our own kids. Wait, isn't that the fault of the teachers we had?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah. You guys can
Because
do it.
then
You
they
have
can't.
the
Like, what are you gonna
technology.
say? I mean, they personally didn't, but the system produced most of us. So it produced people incapable of teaching their own kids and to like the basics of life.
And a one kid at a time too. You only
And I
have a
thought that
class
the
of like
schools-
2.
Meanwhile, during COVID lockdowns, you guys just want us to be your babysitters. It's like, what? Make up your mind. So, you know, I don't know, but I can't thank you guys enough. I love talking to people who actually are really good teachers because I think I want to showcase you guys because I want parents to see this is what good teachers sound like because they're so used to TikTok teachers. They're so used to seeing on social media, like, you know, that's not all teachers. That's a subset of teachers. And tragically, they do represent what is trendy at the moment and what the NEA and the AFT and the Department of Education would like you to believe is the majority. Because if you believe it's the majority, then, you know, you're going to react in certain ways. So then they can react in certain ways to call you crazy and diagnose your kids with mental illness and take them away from you. But it's not the majority of teachers. The majority, sadly, are people like you see right in front of you, but who are just trying to get their paycheck and go home, and they don't have whatever that thing is that these people sitting here have that says, I'm not doing that. I'm going to say what I want. And I'm going to do that. And whether it's moral courage, experience, a bank account, you know, years under their belt, whatever it is, they don't have it. And yes, in the aggregate, it produces something evil, but they individually aren't. And I really wonder sometimes if we were able to find them, you know, and speak to them, not at them or about them, that maybe they would have more courage, that we'd have more Ramonas and Rays and Stephanies and DTs. So
Maybe
that's,
we need better training and better curriculum. And if we could, ideally, what would be great would be to say, okay, let's take the teachers who have the best results and let's get them in a working group, and they're going to do
Yes.
curriculum, and every teacher is going to follow this curriculum. and they're, but even then there's an art here that's difficult to pin down. There's personality
That's
thing
right.
that's difficult to pin down, but
I
can it
would
be
like to
done?
see more politicians, though, talk to people like you. I see a lot of, and I'm sure, Stephanie, you cover this, so you've seen this a lot. Politicians talk a lot about, we're going to pass this law, or we're going to have this policy, or we're going to make a parental bill of rights, we're going to do things. And I keep wondering, when are they going to sit down with some of the dissident teachers for real and say, okay, teach me. I'm just a politician. Like I'm out there to sell a policy that, but I really don't know what I'm talking about. Because no, they don't. They really don't. I've gone face to face with a couple of them and they're just like, what we need to do. And I'm like, no, that's not it.
Deb, you know very well that you cannot reason with narcissistic sociopaths.
Okay, you're right.
You know that. Come
They're
on.
politicians.
You know
It's in California specifically, and I think in Massachusetts, Illinois, New York, and a couple of those other states
true.
like that. The union controls the legislature, so they don't really care what we think as long as the union numbers are high enough to continue the political contributions that keep the legislators in power. So if it's the union will give them their marching orders. That's how that's going to work. But there's opportunities that I just think you can't give up hope, because we have to fight for what we had in this country,
right,
and what's been chipped away at. And the kids are the key to that. And I tell my students all the time, I'm like, I am not here to teach you history. I'm here to teach you to become like warrior poets. Like I tell them that, and I mean it sincerely. Like you have to be willing to fight for what you believe in, and you have to be literate enough to out talk and outthink these idiots who are throwing this crap at you constantly.
For sure.
And so they want to be that. These kids want that, guys. They do. They don't want to sit there and be on TikTok all the time. I mean, they love TikTok, I won't lie, but like they want an education too. They really do. It matters to them. My son is all excited because I'll show him these like smart people memes, and he gets the reference and he's all excited about it. I'm like, yeah, but you wouldn't know that if you hadn't read all the books you've read.
Kids like to know stuff. It's so true. All right. I have kept you guys like way longer than I thought I would. And I'm so eternally grateful. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I'm glad that I got to even introduce people who didn't already know each other. That is always fun for me.
Thank you so much.
Everybody now knows
Ray,
Ray,
Ramona,
who's like the best ever. We love him.
You still don't know my name, and you never will. Haha.
All right, Ray, tell us the Give, Send, Go. Tell us the Give, Send, Go. Everybody watching needs to give to Ray's Give, Send, Go.
Oh, it's just Give, Send, Go at Ray Shelton.
Okay.
So you can just go to Give, Send, Go and type in my name.
Okay.
You'll see my face and my First Amendment face.
Help him, because being defamed when you've given so many years to so many kids and shape their lives is really just wrong. And that needs to not happen. And they need to be made an example of. And Stephanie is at teachingliberty.org. Please go check her out. She's got a fantastic podcast, and you've written a big article, right, about this, the stuff with the Department of Education.
Yeah, I had put it in the live chat. I had put it in the live chat. When it's over, I'll put it in the comments as well, so people can check that out. They have a week to go to the
August 1st.
Yeah, August 1st. So through August 1st, go to the Federal Register. If you read my my article, I'll link you directly to it, because there's a lot of things on the Federal Register you can leave a comment on, but we want to leave for the Department of Education for this act that it's about funding in special education. So we give you all the talking points. It's very complicated. They refer to this law and that law. And so I try to really break it down and give you a little context so that you can go out there and leave those comments. Please, please, please go do that.
And tell your
share
friends.
it. Yes, share it with 5 friends.
Yep. And DT is at educatedandfreed@substack.com, writes long form pieces from the perspective of a practicing teacher. They're fantastic. I warn you in advance, you're going to read this stuff and you're going to want to homeschool when you're done. So I'm just telling you, like, that's just my warning, but they're great. And she's great. And everybody here is great. And thank you so much. I'm a fangirl.
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Deb.
I really appreciate you all. And I hope that I will see you back again soon. Have a great night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Deb.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.